Liz, you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin. I guess first a question. When we were talking about the 25th Amendment resolution, and you asked if what happens if it gets there after he's gone, is there any chance, are you hearing that he might resign? Is there any reason to think that might happen?
I've had some few discussions. My gut tells me no. I'm seriously thinking of having that conversation with him tonight. I haven't talked to him in a couple days. From what I know of him, I mean, you guys all know him too. Do you think he'd ever back away? But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to call him. This is what I think. No, it'll pass the House. I think there's a chance it'll pass the Senate even when he's gone.
Good morning and happy Saturday. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and this is The Deal with Ed Clark. And we got so much to talk about today. In the lead in there, you saw heard the leader of the Republican Party, Kevin McCarthy, and the former number 3 in the Republican Party, Liz Cheney, who was excommunicated for her disdain for Donald Trump. But guess what? We find out there's a tape. And in the tape, it says that Kevin McCarthy had approached or was going to approach Donald Trump about resigning because he felt like they knew the impeachment was going to occur, and it did. And at one point, they even thought they had 17 votes from Republicans to impeach Donald Trump. Now, because I said Donald Trump, we're going to have to play other video about him today. And a lot in this segment is going to be about Donald Trump, unfortunately. But who better to talk about Donald Trump than his best friend, Val Atkinson? Hey, Val, welcome back to The Deal.
Hello, Ed. I don't know about the best friend label there.
Val, I try to keep this light because I think Donald Trump is a clown. Not just because he's orange, but because he's a clown. He ascended to the presidency because people gave him free advertisement because he was Donald Trump. He had been on Apprentice, and he had been in our lives, ruining the USFL and all kind of Pizza Hut commercials, being in WWE wrestling and all that. He's the quintessential American celebrity. Somebody who's rich for no reason and does nothing, and not necessarily even rich. We don't even really know how much money he has, Val. But let's circle back. Let's talk about what we heard first from the would-be Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, who had denied for the whole last year that he had any serious conversations with Donald Trump about resigning. What did you hear in that clip we played of Kevin McCarthy and Liz Cheney? And of course, there's other people on that tape that we should be hearing about in the next few weeks. And we don't even know who leaked the tape because Liz Cheney said it wasn't her. But what did you hear in this, Val?
What I heard, Ed, was a guy who wants to be Speaker of the House doing whatever he think is necessary to appease whoever happens to be in front of him at that time. I heard him choosing his words very carefully to say, especially when he was talking to Liz Cheney. Yeah, I don't know how it was going to go, and I don't know what he would have done, but yeah, I think I would have asked him to resign, I would have loved to have heard a conversation with he and Donald Trump 10 seconds after that statement. You would have heard a totally different McCarthy. This guy is the biggest charlatan, the biggest chameleon that I think politics has ever known. He has one goal in mind and one goal only. He wants to be Speaker of the House. And whatever it takes, he'll do. That's why we find him today, as we speak, kissing Donald Trump's ring after he said all of those horrible things about him, because the listener was not necessarily a Donald Trump fan. And this guy, that's the way he is, and that's the way he'll be. I think going further, Ed, this is one of the reasons why we find that Donald Trump is not all of that upset with Kevin McCarthy right now. There's a reason behind that. Donald Trump may know McCarthy better than most of us do. And if Donald Trump can help Kevin McCarthy become Speaker of the House, guess who's got a friend in the House? Mr. Trump. We've all got to look at this through the lens of the players. And the players right now are Kevin McCarthy, who wants to be Speaker of the House, Donald Trump, who the Tea Party has chosen to be their leader, and the rest of us Americans. And right now, Kevin McCarthy is on the hot seat simply because we have a 1-6 committee. But if he becomes Speaker of the House, guess what's going to happen to that 1-6 committee?
There won't be one. So we can already figure that part out, right? There won't be one at all. You know, I want to remind the folks you're watching the deal. We took last weekend off for the holiday and Easter holiday, so I hope everybody had time with their families if they did, and if you traveled, I hope you were safe. We're going to talk about travel in the next segment a little bit because things are going to change there and so on and so forth. Val, you know, you bring up a good point about, you know, McCarthy and his desire to be Speaker, because the Republicans believe that they have such an upper hand because of the economy and some other things we'll talk about later, that they're going to take over the House, may even take back the Senate. But let's talk about a broader question, or actually a more philosophical question, I guess. To what end are we even concerned about what Kevin said to Liz in that meeting? And then even further, Benny Thompson and all the folks on the 1-6 committee, you know, Adam Schiff and all those folks. There's reams and reams of evidence that these people really tried to overthrow the government. I don't, there's no mincing words about it. We have never, at least where anybody could see it, believed that we were ever close to overthrowing the government, except maybe the Civil War, and then even then, the Union was much stronger than the Confederacy. They won the war. They assassinated Lincoln, and the Confederacy still didn't take over. The Union was sustained. So here's the question, Val. To what end? Benny Thompson has reams and reams of information. Now we know they have tapes. And I talked about this the last time we were on, because they had tapes that could undo Richard Nixon, but Nixon never served a day in jail. He never was charged with anything. A lot of people walked scot-free. Yeah, Gordon Liddy and a few people went to jail for a little while, but they came out and became celebrities on the right. It didn't hurt them at all. Is there a point to all of this, Val? What happens once we know this, and if the American people know it? What? So what?
Well, I got 4 words that all start with D, and I'll need to explain. Democrats don't deserve democracy. And before you jump out of your seat and fall down the step, let me explain. I don't believe anyone deserves anything that they are not willing to fight for. And right now, it appears to me, a lifelong Democrat, since 1968 is when I first cast a vote for a Democratic presidential candidate, His name was Hubert Humphrey. I'll get back to him in a minute. But since I am a lifelong Democrat, I can say this with honesty. The way the Democrats are behaving right now on the 1-6 committee and in the Justice Department, in the White House and everywhere else, all colored houses, we don't deserve democracy because we are not prepared, we're not ready, we're not able to fight for democracy. And I mean fight. I mean coming back from the battle with scratches and missing limbs, but more important, coming back from the battle with blood on your sword, okay? We're not willing to do that. What we want to do is throw out a bunch of information, get people all up in arms, and, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, he did that. Show me that again. And get them all up in arms and then have them to say, well, what should I do about it? Okay, go to the polls and vote the guys out of office. Well, the Republicans have beat us to the position on that. It's called gerrymandering, okay? It's called voter suppression. It's called stacking and packing the courts. It's called allowing dark money to prevail. It's called destroying the Voting Rights Act. They beat you to the punch. That doesn't work anymore. It's time to fight for democracy if you really believe in it. And if you come and tell me that, oh, we can't do that because the rules say, you know, I wonder what these guys would do, Ed, if someone would break into their house, kidnap their children, raid their refrigerator, molest and assault their wives. What are they going to say? Well, I can't do anything to stop that. I must call 911 first. I can't do anything because I might violate the perpetrator's rights. What kind of people are we?
Yeah.
When you let rules get in the way and you won't stand up for what you profess to believe in, and you're playing games while someone else comes in and takes everything that is supposed to be dear to you, you have nothing else to fight for. They've taken away your right to have an abortion. They've got this guy who's COVID positive sitting next to you and he doesn't have to wear a mask now, okay? They're doing everything they can to just shove it down your throat. And every time they push, you take a step backwards. You take one more step backwards. You take 2 more steps backwards. And that's why I said in the beginning, the 4 Ds, Democrats don't deserve democracy because you haven't shown me that you're willing to fight for it. When you decide that you want to fight for it, I'll be the first in line to help you. I'll be the first in line to pull the first trigger.
So you're telling me I need to go ahead and buy that island and move there with my goats and my chickens because we're up Schitt's Creek, Val. Then in that case, which brings me to an interesting point about fighting. I want you to look at a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I don't recommend for most people. Like I said, I do this shit, so y'all don't have to watch it. But you're going to have to watch this one, and then we'll talk about it when we come back.
Of either voting for freedom by voting for Donald J. Trump for president again for 4 more years, voting Republican straight down your ballot, or you're going to vote for socialism and vote to completely end America as we know it. And this is no joke. They do not want you to be able to defend yourself, because if you can defend yourself, guess what? Then you can stop a tyrannical government. However, if they take away your guns, then you can't, not only can you never stop a tyrannical government, you can never even defend yourself if someone is breaking in your home. And that's the reality. This is.
So Val, that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a representative from the state of Georgia. There is a move to try to get her off the ballot, and by saying that she was part of the insurrection. So they're using a long way around. They don't even want her to be on the ballot to run. But I want to talk first about the point that she was making. The right always says that the left is trying to take your guns or trying to, put you under a socialist government or whatever. And they go back to that old saw and they're willing to fight, and they're willing to say nasty words, and they're willing to do everything they can because, like you said, they've already gerrymandered. They've already, especially in Georgia, rigged the vote. You can't give a water in line anymore. I can't bring a lawn chair. All these other things that they do. But precisely to Marjorie Taylor Greene and their ability to get people all ginned up, and it's reductive though, because it always says they're going to take your guns, so we got to harken back to 1776 and fight tyrannical government. But a lot of people buy into that, don't they, Val? I mean, Americans believe that 1776 was about this tyrannical British government that was oppressing Americans, and so they had to take up arms, and the only way to do it was to give all American guns and then to codify it into the Constitution because the British were so oppressive. But that's not the real story, is it, Val?
No, it's not, Ed. And I wish Democrats would stop trying to look at this thing so logically, because their opponents, we are trying to determine how and why our opponents behave the way they do by using logical reasoning. And that's something these guys don't use. What they've done, they've gotten to a point in their political lives that they've been sold on. And I've said this 1,000 times, and I'm going to say it 1,000 times in one right here. They've been sold on the idea that the tenets of democracy are such that if they do nothing, then brown and black people will be running this country pretty soon, based on the projected demographics. And they're right about that, okay? The other thing is that they honestly feel that white people have done some honest things to people of color throughout the years, and that certain people of color can't wait to get them back or pay them back for this. So they have to be prepared for this. They went all their short lives looking for a leader to protect them against all of these things. So somebody came down an escalator in 2015 and proclaimed that he was the leader of that group. He knew how it operated, what they needed to hear, and what they wanted to do. And that's why they love him so much. It's not that they didn't have a lot of people already. They needed a leader to do the crazy, wild ass stuff that they wanted done. And now they will fall on their swords for this guy. He is the leader, without a doubt. Democrats are still playing by the rules. And these guys have decided that I am going to pull the rug out from under this thing called rules, and I ain't playing by them. So you can play by the rules all you want, but I hope you don't expect me to. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to win, and I ain't playing by the rules. Yeah. And Democrats have their hands tied, says, well, I can't do this, and I gotta do it this way, because the rules say, and maybe we can get people to vote more and have more turnout in precinct 83, and maybe we can hire some vans to take some. And I'm going to be on the side that's sitting back watching these stupid SOBs, not making any inroads because they don't understand what's going on. Getting back to your initial question though, and sorry it took me so long. These people really don't care about guns per se that much. It's an issue, but it's a supporting issue, because the main primary issue is what I started off talking about. That is control of the processes and levers of government. And in a democracy, the majority of the people determine that. They're about to lose this democracy. And if you lose the democracy, all the guns and the money and all that stuff don't mean a thing, because the people in charge, the majority determines how it is levered and leveraged and how it is managed. So that's how the guns things and the abortion things and the CRT stuff and All of these are supporting things.
Right.
But
They're
what
not.
they're
They're
really
not this
fighting
thing.
for
Yeah.
is control of this whole thing called government, which they
Right.
can't do if the demographics are correct.
Yeah, exactly. I hear some music, Val. That means we need to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about one other congressperson, Madison Cawthorn. Seems like he's been showing up a lot lately on the deal, but we got some stuff to talk about him. We'll also talk about the other thing. You said that now people are going to be sitting beside you on the plane with COVID and at the end of the mask mandate, or is it the end of the mask mandate? I don't know. And then in our final segment, we're going to go to Florida. We're going to spend the whole last segment in Florida. So in the second segment, we're going to talk about Madison Cawthorn, COVID, and a whole bunch more. Stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back.
when you want to talk, I'm here.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. It is Saturday, April 23rd, 2022. You guys, one day, Val, I think we'll just do a compilation of what we talk about in the middle of, between the breaks. That may get some people riled up, because that's when we talk all our shit in the middle of it. Maybe we should just stop having breaks and just play straight through. I don't know. But you know, when we left Val, we were talking about guns and again, the American religion is fake patriotism. I got to write that book, because the reality is they hijacked Jesus, they hijacked the founding fathers, and made it out to be that these people who are people don't really know. You don't know Jesus, and you don't know George Washington, you don't know, Thomas Paine or any of these other people, right, Val? So you make it out that you know exactly what was on their mind, and especially Americans, what was on the founding fathers' mind was everybody needed a gun to protect them from whatever. But as we try to deconstruct, and you did a very good job with it at the end of the last segment, this is about being scared that Negroes are going to be in charge. Now, I think their math is off, because it ain't, I mean, I guess I shouldn't tell them, but it ain't that many Negroes. Now there's a fair number of Black folks and Hispanic people, and now all these South Asians that are coming, and people from Asia proper that are coming, right? And there's a real melange for the first time of a lot of different people. And white people are not the majority. Classically, West European white people are not the majority in some places, and they're running scared. So they have to do what they do. And we'll talk about Florida in more detail in the last segment, but the governor redraws the districts. Not the legislature, the governor of Florida redraws the districts, and tries to pass that off, and tries to get rid of every district that might have a Black person that can win. He does it out in the open with impunity. But I digress, because we're going to go back to Florida at the end. See, you said we get jacked up in the middle of these breaks, and then I'm mad when I come back. What I wanted to talk about, Val, is this clown. So Madison Cawthorn, who said that there were orgies going on in D.C. with cocaine, right? Then pictures show up of him in lingerie. He's been accused of abusing his wife. And now, let's watch this video, Val, and we'll talk about Congressman Madison Cawthorn.
So this was the third time Congressman Madison Cawthorn was pulled over and ticketed for a traffic issue just in the last 5 months. The first 2 times were for speeding, but this one was a little bit more serious and ended up with Cawthorn getting his license taken away. Cawthorn was driving down the streets of Shelby on March 3rd at around 10:30 at night when a state trooper ran his license plate after he went left of the center line. The trooper approached Cawthorn's vehicle and told him his tags were expired. He got Cawthorn's license, went back to his car to run it through the system, and realized Cawthorn's license had been revoked due to an out-of-state ticket.
All right, David, we got a little problem. Show that your license is suspended.
The trooper then told him he had to take his license and he wouldn't be able to drive himself home. Cawthorn had a female passenger who switched places with them and they drove off. Frank Baumgartner, a UNC professor who studies data on traffic stops and racial profiling, said not everyone would get quite as lucky as Cawthorn did with this type of stop.
Sometimes it just seems like a driver can get lucky that the officer who pulled them over is a relatively lenient officer, or that officer might be one who's more likely to charge everything that he can charge. So there's a randomness to it. But then there's a systematic bias to it, which is typically people with various social disadvantages get a worse outcome. And when you're a member of the United States Congress, that's a social advantage.
Baumgartner said the judge should take into consideration Cawthorn's driving record when making a decision on this case.
So, Val, Mr. Cawthorn apparently can't drive. Now, he has a driver's license. He's in a wheelchair. He's not full, paraplegic, I guess. He has some paralysis in his legs, but he can drive. And he's driving his pickup truck in Shelby, North Carolina. And he goes left of center. State trooper pulls him over. He has a revoked license, Val. His registration is out. He has been stopped for speeding recently. And in North Carolina, he's been 15 miles over the speed limit, which should be very, very detrimental to your ability to drive. But apparently he's still out there driving. The state trooper you see in the video, Val, lets him switch seats with a female that's in the truck. Now, I don't know if this happened or not, but he didn't even check her sobriety or anything. He just let her switch, and the truck is still unregistered. The professor, Dr. Baumgartner from UNC, at the end of the clip says, well, some people have advantages. Now, I would have said it a different way. I would have said, had it been Val Atkinson, the black dude, he would have been hauled downtown. He would have had to go through a breathalyzer. He would have had to prove his sobriety, all that stuff. But because Cawthorn not only is a congressman, but he's a white person, he was allowed to switch seats with a female who they did not check her license, did not check her sobriety. But Val, you've seen those videos where they make the stop and they ask every black person in the car for their identification.
And they ask permission to search the vehicle.
Search the vehicle. Talk to me about first what we saw there in the video and what Dr. Baumgartner said. But I want to talk about what this means for Madison Cawthorn's career more after that. Tell me about that stop.
Well, last question first. Means absolutely nothing about his career. North Carolina legislature has gerrymandered all of the state legislative districts to the extent that he can't lose if he decides to run. It ain't enough Democrats in his districts or people that vote against crazy stuff like that. So he'll still win. So that's irrelevant almost, that sort of thing. But it's exposing how policing really needs a tremendous overhauling in this country. I think that's what it exposed, because Baumgartner basically said that it's the luck of the draw. It's based on the type of officer that is there when you get stopped. Some of them are more lenient than others. Some of them go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And like you and I just said, Some ask to have the permission to search your vehicle, and some don't. Some want to do a breathalyzer on the individual. Some, they go through a lot of different things. But I think that's a ruse. It's not just the luck of the draw. I think it's based on what you said with the opening of this segment, Ed. It's based on some people coming into the situation with inherent advantages or disadvantages. Back in the day, we just call it white privilege, okay? But that's the way things are. You come in, if I am substituted, I could have been substituted for I call him a perp right now. I don't like to call them bad names and that sort of thing. But McCarthy, look, I am a military veteran, retired military veteran. I am a former professor of political science. I'm an author of 3 books. I do a radio talk show, and I'm doing this podcast right now. I was a columnist for 10 newspapers in North Carolina, African-American newspapers. I could go on and on with the community involvements that I've been a part of and things. But I, as a Black man, would have been hauled off to jail had I been the guy driving with a suspended license, over the line, speeding, and the like. I would have been hauled off to jail. Now, what kind of system and country do we have when the one guy with these advantages that I just cited against the other lawbreaker over here, and the only thing that's different is the color of the skin, Ed, as to who goes to jail and who doesn't?
Well, Val, you know what? It's not even who goes to jail sometimes. It's who dies. I'm a bit remiss because there was some video that I wanted to show, and I hadn't gotten it by the time we came online. You may see it playing over here in the corner. What happened in Wisconsin. Al Sharpton was in Wisconsin yesterday for a funeral for some immigrants from Africa. Their son was driving and he was stopped, presumably for failed registration on the car or expired registration. Now he's dead. And no weapon or anything like that. And Val, this week even, I heard a whole bunch of hand wringing from the right. I think it was their talking point for the week that, Black people don't say anything about Black on Black crime. They're only concerned about if a police kill somebody. And it was in context of, the increase in gun violence in some communities. They always forget that the mass shootings, though, typically occur with a disgruntled white person. They don't want to, do anything about that, but something needs to be done about Negroes and guns. Not white people who mass kill people with guns. And so on Fox News, again, I do this because you shouldn't have to do it. I watched this week, and nearly every program brought up Black on Black killings. And again, Val, I think it's a setup to try to get white people ginned up so that they pay less attention to what we've been talking about previously in the show, about what Liz Cheney and Kevin McCarthy were talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and her nonsense, about Madison Cawthorn and his nonsense, about Donald Trump and his nonsense. The real problem is those scary colored people who kill each other or could potentially kill you or carjack your car or whatever. It's that old saw. There are no Val Atkinsons in the world. There are no Val Atkinsons. Black people don't write books, and they play ball or they kill you. That's the only 2 options we have, right? And so it's very reductive, but it's a very easy strategy to work with because it doesn't cost any money, right? They don't have to convince anybody to move off of a position because they're already at that position because I told you that the American story that they tell is baloney anyway. And so they don't have to convince people, to move off the baloney they've been believing for the last 230 some years. But Val, we'll put a pin in that. All I would say is Madison Cawthorn is not lucky, and he's not even getting any privilege. He's getting what normally happens. There's nothing special about the treatment. And I think that Professor Baumgartner is wrong in that regard, like you were saying. That's normal. It's not special. What would be special is if a black person survived that stop. That would be the anomaly, right? And not what happened to Madison Cawthorn. Anyway, the segment's flying by. Let's go ahead and talk about masks for a second and COVID, Val. I want to give its due look this week. And then, like I said, in the last segment, we're going to go to Florida, and it will be exclusively about Florida and all the nonsense down there. But I want you to see a clip real quick talking about the end of the mask mandates.
Travel looks very different now than it did just a few weeks ago, now that the federal mask mandate is no longer in effect and masks are largely optional on most transportation. A federal judge in Florida overturned the federal mask mandate, which had required face coverings in places like airports and train stations, and CDC and TSA came out and said they would no longer enforce this mask mandate. So that was a very sudden shift from what we'd seen over the past months, whereas this federal mask mandate had been in place since January of 2021. We did see the Department of Justice appeal this decision from the judge, so they're working to reinstate that authority with the CDC. So right now we're just waiting to see what plays out next.
So Val, that's from the USA Today. They were trying to give an explanation of what happened. A Florida judge, a Trump appointee, who had never, ever been in court, becomes a federal judge. And that judge says, even though the mask mandate was set to expire in May, immediately you don't have to wear a mask. So all the way back to the first segment, Val, you talked about you may be on a plane with somebody with COVID because they feel entitled to spread effing COVID. First, talk to me about how these Trumpy judges have had an undue influence over why we can't get rid of COVID. And then what are the ramifications long-term of us? The millionth person has died sometime this week from COVID. Imagine had Barack Obama had been president and 1 million people died, Val. But I digress. The question is, for the moment, what do you think about the end of the mask mandates? What does it mean for us going forward?
I think the scientific community, the professional medical community, to a degree, have almost like caved in to the political right. These are the people that didn't want to wear a mask, and there's just so much pressure from so many different groups. And I think they use our own data against us once the deaths and the hospitalizations start going down, along with the contraction of the disease itself. Once those numbers start going down, they use that as a reason to take off the mask. And they just kept applying the pressure and kept hitting us with that until we got weak and we said, okay, all right, go ahead and take off the mask. I don't know what's going to happen. There are a few cities around, there are a few municipalities and districts that have gone back to the mask after they've taken them off. That could happen statewide, it could happen nationally and beyond. So it's not over yet. And I hate to see just thousands upon hundreds of thousands of people have to give their lives to teach the scientific and medical communities to have a little bit more backbone against these right wingers, and stop believing in what they say, stop being afraid of what they say, stick to the facts, stick to the science, stick to what you know, and to say, hey, we're not lifting anything. And we want you to wear this until. And I know you got some political people that can override you, and that's what happened in this case. But let them do it. You stay firm to who and what you are.
Yeah, Val. I just feel like we're going to have another surge at some point. Like I said, maybe it's not a pandemic anymore, but it's at least endemic, meaning that it's still there. I saw this week several people in the news that, quasi celebrities who have died from COVID this week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It has not gone away. And the tragedy is that some people are not taking advantage of the vaccines. Donald Trump and Mike Pence even told you to take the vaccine. And I can't get why that hasn't permeated with the right. I mean, Trump wanted to take credit for it, but they eschew the credit in this case, which is weird to me. You would have thought they would have said, okay, yeah, Donald Trump did it, so I'm going to be on board with it, but that has not happened. You know what, Val? We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we're going to go to Florida. Florida is the weirdest state in Texas. Is trying to be as weird, I guess, with Greg Abbott. But we're going to talk about Florida and all their problems when we come back. On the way out, you're going to see a clip from Real Talk, which is from a station up in Indianapolis that's part of the Urban One Network. They had a discussion this week about COVID and why Black people were reluctant to take the vaccine. So you'll see that on the way out, and then on the way back in, we're going to talk about Florida. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this.
Social media.
People are living off of what they see on the social media. Because if you remember, when they first started talking about the vaccine, they were talking about it was a chip. They were giving us this information. Oh, it's a chip. Don't do it. Mm-hmm. Or it's gonna make you extremely sick. But if you think about it, if we take any vaccine, there's a side effect from it.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not mean we shouldn't take it.
How many times did you hear, we don't know what's in there? I'm not taking that. I heard it daily. What was so different about this one?
I think it was just because somebody said that we had to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
Talked to my doctor, and he said he would highly recommend that I go ahead and get a shot. It doesn't only help me, it helps my family around me and all the people I associate with. So you're not only helping yourself, you're helping your neighbors also. Well, I might have been a little bit hesitant to begin with, but after looking at all the statistics, and I don't see anything after you take the shot, everybody seems to get along with it pretty good. So you have a spot, take your shot.
It all stems from Disney's decision to come out against the state's parental rights in education law, also known as the Don't Say Gay bill, and threatening to pull funding from key lawmakers. And at the Capitol today, Florida senators passed the bill that would dissolve some special districts, which includes the Reedy Creek Improvement District. The 50-year-old agreement allows the Walt Disney Company to act as its own government. It covers part of Orange and Osceola counties, and if it's dissolved, the counties would be responsible for things like infrastructure and police and fire departments. The counties would also take on its debts, which could be billions of dollars that Disney helps subsidize every year. The House will vote on the bill tomorrow.
This may seem a little hard to follow.
Welcome back to our final segment of the day. I'm always laughing coming back in front of these breaks because we say crazy shit in the break, and we were talking about how American is the bastion of democracy. Not. I told you people over and over again that we have fascist tendencies in America. We just don't want to talk about them in public. And what you saw in the lead-in was about Disney. So The Magic Kingdom is in a fight with the governor of Florida and thereby the legislature of Florida because Val, the Florida legislature, has just completely crumbled in support of Ron DeSantis, who is a would-be Donald Trump. Now, I'm not sure if he's angling to run with Donald Trump or run against Donald Trump. But let's back up. We're going to talk about that. Let's talk about this fight with Disney, though. You heard in the clip, Val, that this has ramifications far beyond just not giving Disney some special status. Actually, it transfers debt onto Orange County and all those counties that surround Kissimmee, Florida, and Orlando. And it now makes those counties responsible for policing and a lot of things that Disney would normally have done. Supposedly, DeSantis was so upset over Disney's objection to the Don't Say Gay bill, which is even more than not talking about homosexuality in the classroom. That it has all these other tentacles in not providing health services for transgender children and a whole lot of things, right? But let's deconstruct this a little bit. First, Ron DeSantis knows that he can use these hot button issues in homosexuality, LGBTQ, all that are hot buttons still on the right. But Val, isn't he sort of in the long run, on the losing end of this? There's a lot of gay people that work at Disney. Let's just be honest. And that's what Disney was saying, that our employees, a lot of them are gay, that perform and that kind of thing. So who is Ron DeSantis hurting here other than the people of Orlando and the surrounding areas? He's not hurting gay people, is he?
Well, I think it'll be a little clearer, Ed, if we backed up and understood the overall Republican strategy for winning, because it takes a little bit of understanding. They're very smart at this. To the right as they can during the primary period, running for primary, to make sure they have the acquiescence of the Trumpers and the old Tea Party and the conservative writers and right-wingers and that sort of thing. Now, some may ask the question, well, if you're running to the right for them, how do you get back toward the center when you got to run in the general election? They don't depend upon enlarging their tent. They depend upon destroying the tent of the other guy. That's how they're going to win. It's called voter suppression. So you run as far to the right as you can in the primary, and you suppress the vote in the general election, and that's the way you win. And the other thing they do, and I wish the media would understand me and listen right now, because they use the media during the general election to control the narrative. They use the media. And what I mean by that is they're on a talk show and the media would ask the conservative guy a question and he doesn't answer it, and he changes the narrative and talk about the shortcomings of the Democrat, instead of the media guy saying, no, that's not what I asked you. I asked you about your shortcomings. Instead of doing that, the media guy says, well, it may be something about that, Mr. Democrat. What do you say to that? And the right guy has effectively changed the narrative. And sorry for going into all that kind of detail, but that's how they win the general election. Destroying the tent of the left by voter suppression and using the media to control the narrative to only talk about those bad things, such as Hillary's, emails and her server. How much did we hear about that during the 2016 election? That was the Republicans using the media to control the narrative. We had a billion things to talk about Trump, but they wouldn't allow that to happen. They used, and they're going to do the same thing this time. You ain't never heard so many things about Hunter Biden. You ain't never heard so many things about why Biden won't release his medical records about Alzheimer's. You ain't never heard so many things about the sexual premarital life of Kamala Harris. You ain't heard so many things about that as you will hear leading up to the 2024 election. That's how it went.
But it was okay that Donald Trump paid a woman to have sex with while Melania was pregnant, right? They don't care, right? And it won't make a bit of difference. But you're right. You're going to hear a plethora of things, and like I said, that was why I thought the talking point this weekend. Like I said, if you had watched Fox News, the talking point was that Black communities were on fire, and Democrats weren't doing anything about it. And that to talk about any other police killing was not in bounds because Black people kill each other. They turn it on a dime, and they turned the argument so that you're arguing with them over something you're not going to again change their mind about. Right. I don't know how we end up in this place all the time, Val. So let's talk about Florida in particular, though. A lot of people go to Florida to retire. Let's just be honest. A lot of northeastern snow bunnies go there to retire. The demographics of Florida are in such a way that right now, technically on paper, it looks a lot like North Carolina, right? Retirees and stuff, and some of them who tend to be Democratic. And so if you look at the number of registrants, Val, which I did this week, Democrats actually outnumber Republicans in Florida. But Ron DeSantis this week took away the maps that had been drawn for their state House and Senate races and redrew them himself. And on a voice vote, approved what DeSantis had done, and effectively it will give, I think it was 25-8, something like that, in the state Senate to the Republicans, when it's a 50-50 state for the most part. How does that happen, Val? Is it because we paid so little attention to state races that the gerrymandering becomes so extreme, and in a place like Florida where there's no chance of getting some sort of judge to throw those out, or the Florida Supreme Court to throw out what happened, you're just stuck with Florida being run by the Taliban for all intent and purposes, right? I say it all the time that the religious right who aspires to run government, they're no better than the Taliban to me. They would ban homosexuals. They would not allow minority religions to exist, and so on and so forth. So we know what it looks like in Florida. We know what it looks like in Georgia. We know what it looks like in South Carolina and the rest of the South. North Carolina and Virginia are tenuous because we flop back and forth, right? How do you, and I know this may not be an answer to this, how do you break this hold then, Val? DeSantis is entrenching it pretty good with what he just did this week, but is there any way to break the hold that they have?
Well, the only way you got to do it is that you got to bring the whole thing down and start all over again. You got to change the rules at some point. And that's going to be difficult for Democrats to do, because they're trying to figure out a way, how do I change things to make it fair without breaking any of the rules? And Republicans have already thrown a monkey wrench into the mix, and you're trying to figure out how to make this machine work smoothly with the monkey wrench still in there. You can't. You got to take it out. You got to stop the machine works, first of all. You got to take that out and you got to fix all the problems. Then you can push the start button to start it up again. If you don't want to do that, walk away, find yourself another machine because the one they got now is broken. All you need to do on this gerrymandering thing is gerrymander it one time. Because from that point on, you have the majority and you can make all the rules as to how it works. So from that point on, you choose your own voters. And if you can't win by choosing your own voters, you don't deserve to win, okay? That's what the Republicans have been doing. They have been choosing their own voters. When Democrats had the majority, they wanted to play fair. They wanted to play by the rules, okay? And they didn't want it to get out of whack, out of hand. And they thought a 10-3 or a 6-3 or a 25-8 or whatever was not fair. So they did it a different way. Well, maybe they don't deserve democracy. I don't know, because they're not willing to fight for it. But to answer your question directly, they're going to have to stop the machine, take the monkey wrench out, fix whatever is broken, and start it again.
Yeah. Well, the last Florida thing I want to deal with today, Val, is they're in the business of getting rid of books. There was a move this past week to take some math books out of circulation, or not even allow them in the classroom in Florida. Let's take a look at that, and then we'll talk about it.
For the first time, the Department of Education is giving some examples of what caused dozens of math textbooks to be rejected by the state. The story made national headlines after the department announced it was rejecting 54 books for including things like critical race theory and emotional learning. The department didn't say which books these came from, but did give one example of a word problem that starts with "what me, racist," and asks the student to calculate a level of racial prejudice. Another example included bar graphs that labeled conservatives as showing far more racial prejudice than liberals. The department says it's giving publishers the chance to fix the issues during the current review.
So, Val, now they've managed to conflate the whole argument about critical race theory, about call it whatever you want to, with math. Because in some math books, as the setup for the problem, it even mentions, the possibility that somebody's doing a study about race and they want to come up with a formula to figure out, how to, that somehow that's indoctrinating children or either harming white children. These are the most fragile ass people I've ever seen in my life. But so now we got to the point, Val, where you can't even have books that you want a bunch of dummies, essentially, right? You want people to follow. Again, I suppose they want to go back to those books that said George Washington chopped down a cherry tree, couldn't tell a lie, and slaves were happy-go-lucky and loved their masters. Is that? I mean, I've been very reductive today and tried to bring the arguments down to what I believe it is, which is white people are scared. But is that what we're seeing here?
They know, Ed, if the truth be told, that a whole swath of white kids are going to grow up saying, boy, my ancestors were horrible. I don't want to be like them. And it's going to take some of their moxie away. It's going to take some of their good feelings away from being proud of being white and going out and taking the offensive on things and be world leaders and all that. That's what they don't want that. So they'd rather live a lie. They know that you can't run that forever. That what you're doing, you're isolating yourself against not only the truth, but against the rest of the world. The rest of the world is not going to go along with your lie and pretend. So they don't care. They become some horrible example, and I hate to even use their name in this because I don't have any bad thing to say about Quakers, but they are some horrible example of Quakers gone awry. Get into their own little silos over here and do these kind of things and don't care what happens. I think if white America, right-wing America isn't careful, that's where they're going. they are going to these silos and places where nobody's allowed to say this or do this. Nobody's allowed to think this. They insulate themselves after a while. And one of the signals to say that this is going that way, Ed, is when you watch other countries one by one, starting with the EU, starting to really look at the United States with a jaundiced eye, saying, I don't know if we can go along with that. Count me out on that one. And next thing you know, we start ostracizing others. They begin to ostracize us. We get into this little small group. And when I say we, I'm talking about the United States of America, because that is the time that non-whites in this country need to just look at and be very careful about the decisions they make about their future. Because you have to be careful not to let that right-wing white portion of America take us down with them.
Yeah, I hear you, Val. Look, we have not solved any of the problems I had started out to solve today. We want to get Donald Trump in jail. We were going to get Madison Cawthorn and Marjorie Taylor Greene and those people out of the house. We were going to fix COVID. We were going to get people in Florida to act right and not ban books and all that stuff. But we failed again, Val. But we did have a good discussion, and I hope it provokes people to think long and hard about your 4Ds, because I think that's where we need to be, Val. We need to be thinking about being much more aggressive in our stance against the right, and not acquiescing and not just laying down. Before we get out of here, though, I do have a good announcement for you, and you'll like this, Val. The Deal Radio is going to be debuting in the middle of May. And what you'll find on the Deal Radio is it'll be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can always tune in and probably hear Val talking or me talking, but you'll also be able to hear Boney James playing some music or whatever. So it's going to be smooth jazz talk. There'll be a block on different music styles, reggae or new music or whatever. You'll be able to pick it up from here on the website, thedealwithedclark.com. We're working on the back end programming right now. Some of the voices that you may have heard in the past on local radio, if you've been in the Raleigh-Durham market, DC, BVic, and people like that will be on there. You'll hear their voices, and they'll be playing music, and then hopefully we'll have some interesting shows in the talk block. So keep your eye out for that. We'll have more announcements on it, and Val will be happy to know that the smooth jazz segment will be on there as well. Look for that in the middle of May. In the meantime, what we always do before we end is I got to ask Val, what do we got coming up, Val?
Well, it's a long time coming, but in our next show on Connections, which is on Foxy 107, 104, a Radio 1 Raleigh piece, which is a part of Urban One. We're going to have some guests to start preparing us for the elections coming up in May and in November. So we're going to start analyzing some of the more important races, and we are going to start choosing or suggesting to you who we think the better candidates are for each of the seats that are available. So we're going to start that on our next show, which will happen a week from tomorrow.
Yeah, that's so important. I know, Val, we talk a lot of junk here about the Democrats not being as forceful as they need to be, and that you just can't only talk about getting people to the polls. I always go back to that there never should ever be a situation where you don't even think about staying home. If there's a race for dog catcher, well, you need to be voting for it, because you need to be worried about the dogs running around in your neighborhood. Whatever. The soil and water district, you need clean water. You need to be thinking about that. So I want people to take that serious. So you need to check out Connections next Sunday on Foxy 107, 104, or on the internets. at Radio 1, and then look for Foxy 107. Hey Val, I hear some music. That means we gotta go. So, folks, go out. It's a beautiful Saturday here in Raleigh. I'm looking out the window. So wherever you are, I hope it's beautiful there. And come back with us next week. You've been watching The Deal with Val Atkinson and Ed Clark. See you next Saturday. Bye.
Liz, you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin. I guess first a question. When we were talking about the 25th Amendment resolution, and you asked if what happens if it gets there after he's gone, is there any chance, are you hearing that he might resign? Is there any reason to think that might happen?